Hello students, I am Dr. Shilpashri and welcome to my channel Study Management. In this video, we will be studying a very interesting topic, Hawthorne Experiments and its influence in the development of human relations approach. Human relations approach, it is also known as the neoclassical approach. Classical management thinkers such as F.W. Taylor, who is famous for his contribution in the field of scientific management, and Henry Fayol, well known for his work on the administrative management, both of them have neglected the human relations aspect in the organization. Criticisms in classical management thought gave rise to the human relations movement. Human relations approach stressed the importance of human relations and informal groups among the workers at the organization. Most important contribution to the human relations school of thought was made by Professor Elton Mayo and his colleagues through their famous Hawthorne experiments. The Hawthorne experiment was an intensive and systematic analysis of the importance of human factor in the organization. The human relations movement was a result of a series of experiments conducted by Professor George Elton Mayo. He was a psychologist in Harvard University, and his associates Fritz J. Roethlisberger and Whitehead, both were sociologists also working in the Harvard University. And these Hawthorne experiments were conducted at the Hawthorne plant of the Western Electric Company for a period of 8 years from 1924 to 1932. So through the Hawthorne experiments, Mayo came to the conclusion that human relations and group norms matter more than the physical factors present in the workplace. And this particular thinking changed the traditional thinking of managers, and it is for this reason Elton Mayo is regarded as the father of human relations school. The Hawthorne experiments were conducted in the Hawthorne plant of the Western Electric Company situated in Chicago. You can see the picture of the Western Electric Company here. And this particular company manufactured telephone system bells, and it employed around 30,000 employees during the period of experiment. The company was well known for providing various kinds of benefits like pension and sickness benefits and other recreational facilities. However, despite these facilities, there was a great deal of dissatisfaction among the workers and the productivity was not up to the mark. Initially, the company sought the help of the National Academy of Sciences to investigate the problems of low productivity, but however, the company failed to come to any conclusion as to why there had been fluctuations in the productivity. And it was then the company sought help from the group of university professors from Harvard University, Professor Elton Mayo, who was a psychologist, and Professors Roethlisberger and Whitehead, who were both sociologists, to tackle the problem. And the main objective of the series of studies done in the Hawthorne experiments was to identify the factors affecting the efficiency and productivity of the workers working in the Hawthorne plant. Here in the picture, you can see the aeroplane view of the Hawthorne plant. The Hawthorne experiments were divided into 4 different phases. The first phase of experiment is known as the Illumination Experiments. The second phase of experiment was Relay Assembly Test Room Experiments. The third phase was the Mass Interviewing Program. And the fourth phase was Bank Wiring Observation Room Experiments. The first phase of Hawthorne experiment is the Illumination Experiments, which was conducted for a period of 3 years, that is from 1924 to 1927. Illumination experiments were undertaken mainly to find out how the varying levels of light at the workplace affected the productivity of the workers. As you can see here in the picture, the workers are working in the factory with light being considered as one of the important physical factor influencing their productivity. It was assumed that with higher illumination, that is with higher intensity of light, productivity of the workers would increase. Under the Illumination Experiments, the workers in the Hawthorne plant were divided into two separate groups. Group 1 was known as experimental group and group 2 was known as the control group. In the experimental group, the workers were exposed to varying intensities of illumination. They were made to work at different levels of lighting. Whereas in the control group, the workers had to work under constant intensity of illumination. There was no changes made in the lighting. The researchers found that as they increased the illumination in the experimental group, both groups increased the production. The researchers had expected that when the illumination in the experimental group was decreased, the productivity will be less. But surprisingly, the production continued to increase in both the groups when the illumination in the experimental group was decreased. It was only when the illumination was decreased to the level of moonlight, that is below the normal level, the production in the experimental group decreased. From this experiment, it was concluded by the researchers that there was no relationship between illumination of light and productivity of the workers. Through the illumination experiments, the researchers found that when the intensity of light was increased in the experimental group, there was an increase in production in both the groups. When the intensity of light was decreased, the production continued to increase in both groups. But when the intensity of light was decreased much below the normal level, the intensity of light was very dim, equivalent to the moonlight, the production decreased in the experimental group. Thus, it was concluded that illumination, that is the intensity of light, did not have any effect on the productivity of the workers. Researchers concluded that there was some other factor that was interfering the productivity, and therefore another phase of experiment was undertaken. Relay assembly test room experiment is the second phase of the Hawthorne experiments, which was conducted for a period of 2 years, that is from 1927 to 1928. The main objective of this experiment was to determine the effect of changes in various job conditions on group productivity. The researchers first set up a relay assembly test room and two female employees were chosen. These girls were asked to further choose four more girls as co-workers. So totally there were 6 girls working under this experiment. The output depended on the speed and continuity with which the girls worked. In the picture here, you can see 6 girls working in the relay assembly test room. The relay assembly test room experiment started by introducing different kinds of changes. The first major change was change in the incentive system. Generally, in an organization, the extra pay or the bonus to the employees is paid based on the overall performance of the organization. But here, in this case, incentive to each girl was paid based on the performance of the other 5 girls, and it increased the productivity of all the 6 girls. The second major change was done with respect to the duration of the rest. 5 minutes rest, both one in the morning session and one in the evening session, were introduced, and it was later increased to 10 minutes each in the morning session and in the evening session, and the result was again productivity of the girls increased. The third change also was with respect to the frequency of the rest period. The frequency of the rest period was increased but reduced from 10 minutes to 5 minutes. However, it was noticed that the productivity of the girls decreased slightly, and the girls complained that frequent rest intervals affected the rhythm of the work. Again, the fourth change was also with respect to the rest period itself. Here, the number of rest was reduced to 2 of 10 minutes each, but in the morning, coffee or soup was served along with sandwich, and in the evening, snack was provided. And it was noticed that with these changes, the productivity of the girls increased. The fifth change in this experiment was a change in the working hours of the girls. The girls were allowed to leave at 4:30 p.m. instead of usual 5 p.m. and later they were allowed to leave at 4 p.m. itself, and the work on Saturday was eliminated, and it was observed that the productivity increased due to this particular change. As each change was introduced under the experiment, it was observed by the researcher that absenteeism among the girls decreased, morale of the girls increased, and less supervision was required. It was assumed that these above positive factors was due to the changes that were made with regard to the incentives, rest periods, flexible working hours. The researchers then decided to withdraw all the above benefits that were provided during the period of experiment. However, the results were very ambiguous and surprising, as the performance of the girls tended to increase even when the improvements in the working conditions were withdrawn. It was found that productivity increased not because of the positive changes that were made in the physical factors, but because of the change in the girls' attitude towards work and their work group. They developed a feeling of stability and sense of belongingness. Since there was more freedom of work, they developed a sense of responsibility and self-discipline, and there was also a friendly and cordial relationship between the workers and supervisor. Mass interviewing program is the third phase in the Hawthorne experiment, which was conducted for a period of 2 years from 1928 to 1930. The main objective of mass interviewing program was to determine the employee's attitude towards company and other factors such as supervision, insurance plans, promotion and wages. 20,000 interviews were conducted under the mass interviewing program. Initially, these interviews were conducted by the means of direct questioning by interviewer to the employee, such as, "Do you like your supervisor?" Since this method had disadvantage of restricting the response of the employee to only yes or no, the employees were not able to express their opinions or views freely. So the method was changed to non-directive interviewing, wherein the questions were more open-ended in nature and the employees could give their feedback in detail. So the method of interviewing was changed from direct interviewing to non-direct interviewing so that the employees can express their views freely. And the interview program gave valuable insights about the human behavior in the company. Through the mass interviewing program, the researchers observed the following points: the opportunity given to the worker to talk freely and put forward his grievance created a positive effect on his morale. That is, when the method of interviewing was changed from direct interviewing method to non-direct interviewing method, the worker was able to express his viewpoints in detail. It was also observed that the workers' behavior was being influenced by the group behavior, that is, in the group in which he was working. The complaints that the workers put forth to the management were often the symptoms of some deeper dissatisfaction. The worker's satisfaction depends on his status in the organization, that is, the position or the status that he holds in the organization. Behavior of the worker both within the workplace and outside affects his productivity. Bank wiring observation room experiment was the last phase of the Hawthorne experiment, which was conducted from the year 1931 to 1932. The basic objective of this particular experiment was to determine the functioning of small group and its impact on individual behavior. So through this particular experiment, they wanted to analyze as to how working in groups influences the behavior of an individual worker. And for this experiment, 14 male employees were employed, and the work involved was attaching the wire to switches for certain equipment used in telephone exchange. As you can see here in the picture, workers are engaged in attaching the wire to switches for the equipment that was used in telephone exchange. Under the bank wiring observation room experiments, the hourly wage rate for the workers was based on the average output that was produced by each worker. And the major hypothesis of this particular experiment was that in order to earn more, the workers would produce more. They also assumed that the workers would help each other to get the group bonus. But however, this particular hypothesis did not hold valid. They found that the workers had decided the target for themselves, which was much lower than the company targets. The workers produced much lesser than the company expected them to produce. Through this experiment, the researchers observed that the workers were deliberately producing less than what was expected by the company, and the workers gave the following reasons for the restricted output. The first reason is fear of unemployment. The workers feared that if there would be more production per head, some of the co-workers or their friends who were working along with them in the organization would be put out of employment. The second reason is fear of raising standards. The workers feared that if they reach the set standards, the company would further raise the standard of production. Third reason was protection of slower workers. The workers were friendly on the job as well as off the job. Hence, the faster workers intentionally restricted their output with a view to protect the slower workers from losing their jobs. And the last reason was satisfaction on the part of the management. According to the workers, management seemed to accept the lower production rate as no one was being fired or even reprimanded for the restricted output. And this study suggested that the informal relationships are an important factor in determining the human behavior. The major findings from the Hawthorne experiments are as follows. Physical and environmental factors do not materially influence the workers' performance and their attitude to work. As we have seen in the case of Illumination Experiment, light being a physical factor did not affect the productivity of the workers. Even in the case of the relay assembly test room study, changes in the working conditions did not influence the performance of the girls. Workers' behavior at workplace is more influenced by the social and psychological needs. The sense of security, recognition, morale, and belongingness is of crucial importance in increasing the productivity of workers, and this was very much evident through the experiment done in relay assembly test room study. Good communication between supervisor and workers can improve the relationships and productivity of workers. Through mass interviewing program, it was very much evident that the employees work better when they are allowed to participate in decision making process affecting their interests. And the bank wiring observation room study made it very much evident that group norms influence the attitude to work, behavior with management, and level of production. Informal work groups have a great influence on productivity. And these viewpoints of Hawthorne experiment thus gave birth to human relations movement. Here I have listed few books that covers the topic Hawthorne experiments that you can refer for your further reading and understanding. I hope you have enjoyed watching my video. Thanks for watching. Please do like, share and subscribe to my channel.